Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to today's explainer, where we are going to completely decode what is essentially the engine room of India's democracy, the executive branch. Now, if you've ever flipped through constitutional law and just felt totally overwhelmed by the sheer volume of articles and clauses, trust me, you are in the right place. Today, we're using a brilliant set of curated, handwritten constitutional notes to break down this complex machinery. Our goal here? To map out exactly who holds the power, how that power is kept in check, and how the entire system functions from the top down. Because honestly, whether it's rolling out a new tax law or handling a national emergency, this is the machinery making the final call.
So, here is our roadmap for today. 1. The Council of Ministers. 2. Size and accountability. 3. The Prime Minister's power. 4. The Attorney General. And finally, 5. The State-Level Advocate General. We're going to constantly mirror the union rules with the state rules, which makes remembering all this complex law incredibly easy.
All right, let's kick things off with part 1, the Council of Ministers.
Now, we have to start by looking at this incredible constitutional illusion. On paper, right, under Article 53, Clause 1, the president sits at the very top as the head of the state. But in our parliamentary reality, that is mostly just a nominal role. The true operational power, the real head of the government, is the Prime Minister, backed up by the Council of Ministers as laid out in Article 74, Clause 1. And here's the crucial part. This council officially forms the government the exact moment a prime minister or a chief minister at the state level takes their oath. But once formed, this council isn't just one big, flat group. It's actually split into distinct tiers. At the very top, we have cabinet ministers. These are the senior-most figures, and they always head a ministry if they're given a portfolio. Then you have ministers of state. That's the second rank. They might get independent charge of a smaller ministry, or they might just attend cabinet meetings if they're specially invited. Interestingly, though, this whole classification, it's mostly just convention, not strict constitutional text. Well, with one massive exception. The cabinet itself actually does hold specific constitutional weight under Article 352. That article dictates that the president can only proclaim a national emergency on the written advice of the cabinet. Pretty huge deal, right?
So, we know who they are, but exactly how many can there be, and who keeps them in check? Let's move right into Section 2, Size and Accountability.
For a really long time, the size of the council was basically a political bargaining chip. But that loophole was slammed shut with the 91st Amendment Act of 2003. Literally, no more handing out minister titles just to keep coalition politicians happy. This amendment placed a strict mathematical boundary on the government. The size of the Council of Ministers, including the Prime Minister, absolutely cannot exceed 15% of the total strength of the Lok Sabha at the union level or the Legislative Assembly at the state level.
But wait, what about smaller states where 15% might just be like a tiny handful of people? The Constitution actually steps in here with an absolute minimum strength of 12 ministers for states. And here's a really fascinating piece of constitutional trivia from our source notes. In the states of Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, and Odisha, there is a strict mandate that there has to be a specifically appointed minister in charge of tribal welfare.
Regardless of their size, though, how are these ministers held accountable? Well, under Article 75(3) for the Union and 164(2) for the states, the principle of collective responsibility reigns supreme. The council is collectively responsible to the legislature. As the famous saying goes, they swim and sink together. Meaning a no-confidence motion cannot just target one single individual minister whose policies you happen to dislike. It has to be introduced against the entire council. And if it passes, the whole government falls, the whole shebang.
Which brings us to the absolute dead center of this executive machinery. Part 3, the Prime Minister's power.
Over in the UK, the Prime Minister has historically been described by this Latin phrase, primus inter pares, which just means the first among equals. Sounds quite diplomatic, right? But looking at the Indian context, we really have to ask, is the Indian Prime Minister merely the first among equals, just sitting calmly beside their peers? Or do they command a much, much more absolute mastery over the government? Now, what's really interesting here is how British scholar Harold J. Lasky put it. He famously asserted that the Prime Minister is central to the formation of the Council of Ministers, central to its life, and central to its death. And because India operates on a parliamentary system, Lasky's view is spot on here. Think about it. If the Prime Minister resigns or passes away, the entire Council of Ministers instantly ceases to exist. That is way more power than just being an equal. Let's rapidly break down their immense operational duties. The Prime Minister allocates portfolios. They chair all cabinet meetings and set the agenda. On top of that, under Article 78, the PM is the sole constitutional link between the council and the president. They are literally duty-bound to communicate all administrative decisions and legislative proposals upward. And way beyond the paperwork, they're the main spokesperson for the government of India. In times of national crisis, the whole nation looks directly toward the PM. They are the ultimate focal point of governance. However, as we all know, power isn't just what's written down on paper. It's heavily dictated by real-world politics. A prime minister's true strength shifts dramatically based on political conditions. If a PM heads a single-party majority government, they are incredibly powerful. They can appoint whoever they want and allocate portfolios completely at will. But if a PM is leading a coalition government, well, their power is significantly diluted. They have to consult coalition partners for policymaking, and portfolios are very often handed out based on the demands of those partners, not just the PM's personal preference.
Okay, so we've covered the core political executive. Let's pivot now to the specialized outer orbits of this machinery. In Section 4, the Attorney General. Established under Article 76 of the Constitution, the Attorney General for India is the first law officer of the government. They're appointed by the president, and they actually have to be qualified to be a Supreme Court judge. Now, their term isn't fixed. They hold office purely during the pleasure of the president, which basically makes it a political appointment. Their main gig is giving legal advice to the government and appearing in the Supreme Court on their behalf. But here is a truly fascinating caveat. While they represent the national government, they are actually not barred from private legal practice. As long as they don't stand against the government of India in a court of law, they can still take private cases.
This dual reality sets up a really unique constitutional quirk under Article 88. The Attorney General has the right of audience in all courts within India. But even more interestingly, they have the right to speak and take part in the proceedings of both houses of parliament or any joint sitting. So they can sit right there on the floor with the elected politicians, take part in the debates, but crucially, without the right to vote. They are essentially the government's non-voting legal defender inside parliament.
All right, for our final section, we're going to see that mirrored reality in action. Part 5, the Advocate General. Now, if you were paying attention a minute ago, you actually already know exactly how the state system works. It's all thanks to the rule of equivalency, where the union has the Attorney General under Article 76, the state has the Advocate General under Article 165. The AG is appointed by the president, the Advocate General is appointed by the governor. The AG needs Supreme Court qualifications, the Advocate General needs High Court qualifications. And just as the AG can speak in Parliament under Article 88, the Advocate General can speak in the state legislature under Article 177, again, also without the right to vote. It is a perfect, beautifully structured mirror. So we've unpacked the structure, the strict size limits, the legal defenders, and the monumental role of the Prime Minister. But as we wrap up today's explainer, I want to leave you with a final, somewhat provocative thought. We learn that the Prime Minister literally dictates the life and death of the Council of Ministers. Yet their practical power fluctuates wildly depending on the political tides of coalition versus majority rule. So think about this. When a single political party does secure an absolute, unshakable majority in the Lok Sabha, totally reducing the need for any internal compromise, where does the ultimate balance of power truly rest within this constitutional framework? It's a huge question, and one that defines the very reality of our parliamentary democracy. Thank you so much for joining me. Keep studying those structures, and I'll see you in the next explainer.